Guten Abend und willkommen bei Erkenbrand Klassik. Heute haben wir mit uns Herr Waagenaar, der uns etwas über Richard Wagner erzählen möchte. Und dann welkom ich unsere feste Gäste. Willkommen Herr Yorkshire.
Danke sehr und grüß dich. Es ist super zurück zu sein. Und ich glaube, wir sollten diese ganze Sendung auf Deutsch machen, oder?
Nein. Willkommen, willkommen Mr. H. Of Herr
Hallo.
H. Wir sollten besser nicht Herr
Herr
H. sagen, wie de Implikationen mit einer andere Herr H.
Ik ben misschien de enige Nederlandse nationalist hier vanavond, want ik ga alleen Nederlands spreken tegen jullie. En wij zijn in Nederland en dat gaan we doen.
Und natürlich willkommen Wagner.
Servus, Fausto. Donnerwetter, das wird ja großartig.
Na,
Servus, also Süddeutsch.
now, so after that little anecdote, this episode will be the long-awaited one about pretty much just Wagner, and that's why we decided to do the introduction in German as a little joke. We may slip into German as it goes on, but the picks tonight are all by Wagner. So I'll just give you the floor to introduce us what you wanted to talk about tonight.
Well, thank you, Fausto. The thing is, of course, you asked for my favorite music, and that's really torture, you know. So I had to leave out all my beautiful pieces of Verdi and Puccini and Mozart and everything. But I thought it would be nice to focus on one of my favorites, at least, which is Richard Wagner. Well, we opened with the famous Walkürenritt, as many people will know it. It's from the Ring Cycle, which is 4 long operas, about really great Nordic themes. It's really grand music, you might say, and most people only know Wagner for the grandiose music, you might say. But Wagner has a lot of ethereal music also in his opera. So we shall concentrate a little bit more on one specific opera even. So I'm really strapped down at the moment. But first a little bit about the Walkürenritt. It's from the second opera in the Ring Cycle, which is Die Walküre. And it's about the Valkyries who come on the stage, and they have their favorite picks of the dead heroes with them. So it's nice to think about this is that heaven and rewards are not given in the Germanic mythology to the humble. It's given to the heroes, to the fighters. And fighters for whatever cause, as long as they have been valiant. So, and you can hear this in the music. It's very grand. It's you can imagine all the great heroes marching and with the Valkyries at their side. But there's one interesting thing in this opera. The main Valkyrie, Brunhilde, has not a man with her. Brunhilde has not a man with her, but a woman, Sieglinde. And well, it goes a little bit too far to explain all the intrigue and all the stories of the Ring Cycle. But that's very interesting that she has a woman with her. So that's a little bit Wagner doing his own thing, because normally in Nordic mythology it would only be men. And it is Sieglinde. She is the wife of Siegmund. Siegmund was slain by his father, the god Wotan, and Sieglinde wants to die because her Siegmund was slain. But now she hears that she is pregnant of Siegmund's son, and this is the son who will revenge will take revenge on Wotan for his father, and Wotan and all the gods will perish in the last opera, which is about 12 hours away. And that's get to that one. Okay, so that's just a small little piece about this music. Okay,
I had a piece about the Valkyria. Something that maybe the people would find interesting is that half of the slain heroes go to Valhalla, and everyone knows what Valhalla is, and that's ruled by Odin, and they're going to prepare for Ragnarok in the end. The other half go to Freya's afterlife, and that's a Fokelfanger. So these people, these heroes that die, they do go to a place, and they're preparing for Ragnarok. So the Valkyria, they're to bring these heroes to a place of preparation. Just to bring that out there.
Yes, but not only preparation. I mean, they enjoy themselves very much. It's like this, that they fight during the day, and then all the people that have been killed will rise again, and in the evening they will have a great banquet.
Yes.
So that's the idea of having.
Yeah, they're specifically called Einherjar. But there's also an interesting thing to note in that Norse mythology, the gods are not all of the same people. You have the Aesir and the Vanir, who fight each other before they establish their respective kingdoms, and they build the great hall of Odin in Valhalla. And then there's of course giants and giantesses mixed in there. So it's a pretty multicultural group.
I'm afraid so, yes. And you see what wars come from multiculturalism also.
Yeah, family feuds even.
Yes. So, shall we do a little bit about Wagner himself?
Absolutely. And I think we should also talk about his biggest influences in terms of his patron, Ludwig II, and his big influences in terms of ideology, Gobineau, Chamberlain, and so.
Yes.
Sure.
Well.
No, go ahead.
You've got that the way around. Wagner influenced Chamberlain,
right?
Not
Gobineau influenced Wagner,
not Chamberlain influenced Wagner.
Right, you're right.
Yeah, Wagner was influenced more by Hegel and Schopenhauer, right?
Especially Schopenhauer,
but also Gobineau.
And we should never forget that Wagner was a real thinker in himself. He was not just reading and then just repeating what he read. He was really a thinker and a poet, next to being a great composer.
He also wrote some essays, I believe. Mostly on a very specific subject.
Gesamtkunstwerk also, in his work Gesamtkunstwerk, he tried to unite music, poetry, and dance. So he was
no dance. Don't forget, no dance.
Oh, no dance.
No dance. Because he was it just doesn't fit the music. He was forced to stage an opera in Paris, and they wanted a ballet because that was compulsory in Paris. And Wagner said, well, it doesn't fit the story at all. He didn't want to do it. And they staged it without the ballet, and no Frenchman came because all the Frenchmen want to see the Mademoiselle and things like that. So that was really a big disaster for Wagner.
Typical of the French to ruin everything.
One thing about Wagner, before we go on, is which is interesting, is that he wrote both the music and the lyrics, which was unusual.
Yes, very unusual. And,
well, it took him 26 years to compose.
You mean Parsifal, I guess?
Yeah. No.
The Ring.
Yeah, the Ring.
Mm-hmm.
It took him 26 years to compose that, so I imagine.
Well, it's a bloody long piece.
Great detail. What, 14 hours total, or what? What's the total
like
of?
Something like that. It depends upon the conductor, whether he's a little bit younger or older, or. And of course the German conductors are all taking rather slow tempi. They want to be very serious about it. So Whereas Italians have this tendency to go a little bit quicker because they want to go to their dinner, to their supper, and have their mistress and everything.
Bloody Mediterraneans.
Anyway, so Wagner lived from 1813 until 1883. So he spent most of the grand and wonderful 19th century. He was born in Leipzig. And probably he was the son of his mother's lover at the time. His official father, died very soon. And then his mother married this lover, and he was an actor, which may explain a lot about the fascination Wagner had for well-constructed plots and also the texts, because indeed he did write his own texts. He was not that musically influenced at a young age. He was a Sängerknabe at the Kreuzschule in Dresden, but not very specific over there. He was mainly interested in acting, and he wrote several plays. But then in 1828, when he was 15 years old, he heard the Egmont Overture of Beethoven, and there he decided to become a composer. And he has composed, he was quite proficient, and he composed a lot since 1829, so since he was 16, but nothing is left of it. He did, well, maybe it was not that, but he had a very turbulent life. He got into all kinds of theaters, musical theaters. He became directors over there, and then everything went bankrupt and everything. So he had a very, early on, he already had a very interesting life, you might say. And when he was also throwing the money out of the window, because he liked luxury very much. So he was always on the run for his creditors. That's really the story of his life. Always he was flying his creditors. And on one of his flights, he was going to Paris. And the Paris period was really awful. He had to subsist from writing the most vulgar music and some translations and everything. But all the same, he created in Paris his first opera called Rienzi in 1840. So that was when he was 27. And also Der Fliegende Holländer, because he had been fleeing a lot. He had a lot on sea, and he had witnessed an awful gale, and he wrote this Fliegende Holländer about it.
But back to the Rienzi real quickly, that was very important because that won him the post to Royal Kapellmeister for the King of Saxony in Dresden. Indeed. So that was a quite important work. Yes. Now it's little known compared to his other work, but Rienzi actually gave him a chance. You could say that it propelled him.
Yes. So
it's also the one where he's most influenced by Italian opera as well, I think.
Well, he was still on that influence. I mean, it's hard to escape that influence. Italian opera is great.
You know, he kind of moves away from that as time goes on.
Yes, and you already see that in Der Fliegende Holländer a little bit. So, but then he became the Royal Hofkapellmeister, and then something very important happened: the Revolution of 1840, and he participated. And the interesting thing is, this revolution was both nationalist and liberal.
I happen to have read quite a little bit about the 1848 revolution quite recently. Mm-hmm. The first constitutional parliament and everything that was established in Dresden. And the main point that everyone agreed on was the establishment of a German nation. The debate there was whether there should be a small or a big German solution, which meant including Austria or not. Mm-hmm. But pretty much all the Germans were united on the standpoint of we should form the nation Germany. But for the most part, the Prussians and the Austrians couldn't agree, which ruined the effort. And a lot of the smaller princes, although their influence was limited, also couldn't agree. Then the parliament rapidly declined in number until only the most radical socialists and liberals were left, which then fled Dresden to somewhere else in Saxony, I don't remember which. And there they started forming a sort of basic constitution for the German state, which is actually used as an influence on the modern German constitution, because the one from before the Second World War is no longer in use. This is also the time where they use the black, red, yellow flag as the colors of Germany, which is also the modern German flag. And it was the parliament and the people supporting it were mostly made up of students. And one of my favorite poets, Ernst Moritz Arndt, was a participant.
But it's very important to note that this nationalist movement was very liberal. They hadn't thought out it very well, so they didn't really understand that equality is the enemy of any nationalist sentiment. They didn't understand that yet. Of course, it was also because of the opposition of the kings and small principalities, but they hadn't thought it out very well, I think.
Can I just sort of add a prequel to that, if you like, a prelude, which is basically from 1815 and the defeat of Napoleon and the Congress of Vienna to 1848. You had, exactly, the Metternich system, which is basically where you have absolute monarchies controlling things in quite large empires, especially in France and in Austria-Hungary, in Great Britain, of course. You have a period of re-established monarchy in Prussia. Don't forget Prussia.
Yeah, this is the period where the Dutch monarchy dates from, forced on us by the Congress of Vienna. We never had a monarchy, and we were never under a monarchy. We have never been a great nation.
Yeah, the idea for that was to kind of create stability in Europe, so that there wouldn't be, and sort of balance the power between very powerful empires, so that the idea was that the empires would be too powerful and too big to afford a war against each other, because it would mean. It would mean absolute annihilation. So that was the idea behind it, and it did actually work for a time. But of course, this meant giving the monarchy a lot of power, and of course, the middle classes weren't very happy about that.
So it was sort of the nuclear deterrent for their ages, then.
it pretty much was. Yeah, that's right. And the middle classes, of course, were not very happy because they always want to take the place of the aristocracy.
Yes.
And, we talk about it being a nationalist revolution, but what do you mean by the nation then? Because obviously it was basically the idea of a united German nation throughout, a people throughout the regions where German-speaking people lived.
Yes.
And in other words, not having them in individual little regional groupings.
This is probably the reason the whole conference failed, because at the time, just after the revolution and the first establishment of the first parliament, there was a lot of support from governments for it. But the main discussion point was whether Austria could join, and if Austria were to join, if it could keep its non-German territories inside this new nation. So there was this debate over whether they should include Hungary, Slovenia, and so on. And the Austrians would not accept a compromise on this. That's probably why the parliament failed, because one of the two big nations that were required to make it a success refused to cooperate.
Well, the other problem, of course, was that the Hohenzollerns were extremely powerful.
Yes.
The kings of Bavaria ended up having to become lesser players when we got the United Germany in 1871.
Yes.
The kings of Bavaria basically had to give fealty to the Hohenzollerns of Prussia.
Under the German imperial,
to the rulers of Prussia.
That's
under the
right.
German imperial
exactly.
system up till 1918, Germany was not actually as such a country. It was made up of several countries. Bavaria, Saxony-Württemberg, the Hanse State and Prussia remained independent, forming kingdoms and municipalities under the.
That's right. They were kings under the emperor.
Yes.
You have to remember that Kaiser Wilhelm and Wilhelm II, they were emperors as well as kings,
Yes.
and this is why it's called the German Empire.
Even under Weimar, there still was an independent.
But shall we
Prussia.
return to Wagner, because otherwise we never get to the music.
True.
Yeah, but just to finish off, one of the reasons why the Habsburgs didn't join was because they were simply too powerful, and it would have meant a rivalry with the Hohenzollerns.
Yeah, but that's also to do with the fact that, well, the whole revolution was about unification of peoples, and of course the Austrians were imposing on other nations their will. So
yeah, it was
failure.
multiculturalism,
Yes.
which had actually Mein Kampf Hitler says was one of the weaknesses of the.
It was the weakness.
Austria-Hungary.
Yeah, it meant
Well-
that there was no loyalty really.
Yeah, but that's a little bit. It was working when there were no railroads, for example, when people remained in their own territory all the time, and they just had one emperor that ruled over them. But the big change was the railroad. So everything. Every people went everywhere, and then you get conflict. Diversity and proximity means conflict.
Well, but the 1848 revolution for Austria-Hungary, it wasn't Austria-Hungary until 1848. It was Austria, and the revolution in 1848 in Hungary took a very nationalistic form
For the Hungarians, yes.
for the Hungarians, and that established the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary.
True.
Yeah,
So-
the K and K. Yeah.
Yeah.
K and
So-
K. K and K, huh? Don't forget.
Yes, the K and K, not the K.
Koninklijke Unkaiserliche.
But let's return to
Yes.
Wagner. So in 1852, he met a married woman called Mathilde Wesendonck. And she plays a very important part in his life and in the opera we are discussing. Wesendonck, her husband, had supported Wagner a lot in Switzerland, but, well, Mathilde was quite infatuated with him. It's not quite clear whether this relationship was ever, consumed or consummated, anything else than platonic, but it was, in fact, the love of Wagner's life. It was an impossible love, of course, because she was married, and she was married to his main benefactor. So that was quite troubling, you might say. So, and it's from this tragic love that comes this opera I would like to discuss, which is called Tristan and Isolde. So Wagner was really not a very loyal friend. In fact, he betrayed his friends. Wesendonck he betrayed. Later on, he betrayed von Bülow and things like that. He betrayed his benefactors, money, wives, all kinds of letters of recommendation. They were misused by him, you might say. So he was not a pleasant man, but he was a genius. And, well, you have to forgive a lot to.
Well, did he ever betray Franz Liszt? Because I know that Franz Liszt helped him to escape Dresden.
No, he did not betray him. No, but he did. His last wife. He stole this last wife from the conductor von Bülow, and this wife was actually the daughter of Franz Liszt. So. Yeah, so he was not a nice man, but well, that's not. He was a genius.
So you sent me two different versions of Liebestod.
Yes, I wanted to discuss both.
Right, and
because you see the difference.
Yes, and so can you place Liebestod into context for us before we play it?
Well, we can't play Liebestod yet because we have to. Think about the following. I also gave two files, which is the opening and the last chords of Tristan and Isolde. And that's very important because this Tristan and Isolde is about eternal longing, you might say, a desire that is so impossible and so eternal that it's driving people mad. So we should listen first to the opening of the opera, because there you can already feel a little bit the tension with the famous Tristan chord. So let's play that first.
Okay, so we have the opening to Tristan. Alright, that was the beginning of Tristan and Isolde. Gentlemen?
Yes. What I would like to explain is, you hear this Tristan chord, as they call it, which is a chord that has tension. It wants to get resolved towards some harmonic thing. It's a little bit disharmonic. The notes inside the chord, they also want to move, you know. Mm-hmm. And the unique thing about this opera is that this chord is not resolved until the very end, after 4 hours of opera. And this creates an immense tension in the opera. You feel it, it grips you, you want to go with it, it goes somewhere, but you can't reach the end. So this is an image, or rather it's more a direct feeling of the way desire works. It can drive you crazy. I've listened to conductors explaining about this opera, and they say, well, sometimes you simply have to pull back because it's driving you mad, you know. And that's exactly what the thing that Wagner wanted to accomplish. Now, at the very end of the opera, you hear this same chord, ta 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 ta, yeah, and then it's finally resolved after the death of Isolde from love. Then finally you hear kind of resolution. So maybe we can play the end now, please.
Well, that was pretty.
Yes, well, it's if you are in this opera, you simply are swept away by the waves of music, you might say. And the interesting thing, Isolde, when she's almost dying, she also says, "I'm swept away, I'm drowning, I'm so," and that's the same feeling that the listener has. Actually, it's an impossible longing for the eternal, you might say, for Godhead, maybe even.
It's interesting to compare that with the scene where they're going across the Irish Sea, and the line is "Öd und leer das Meer," desolate and empty the sea.
Yeah, well, typical damn continentals who don't like the sea.
No, but the thing is that this desert, this loneliness, is still how do you say, shot through with desire for the other side, where the lover is waiting. You know, it's really the tension in the music never gets resolved. It sometimes you think it will be resolved, and then it just misses it. And that's the wonderful thing about this opera. It's a device that has been used in other operas too, of course, but it's driven to the absolute maximum over here. And that's why I said to you that this is the most German of all operas, because we think of the Germans as being very disciplined and very with lots of rules and things, but many have remarked that, especially from the French and Italian side, that the Germans are actually not. They have lots of rules because once you set them free, they want to go to infinity. You know, no boundaries. It comes from the deep. The whole universe must be there. So.
It's in the language. I mean, they have words like Sehnsucht and Zeitgeist and so on, which other languages, they don't have so many ways to express very specific emotions and feelings, I don't think.
Yes, this Christian Thielemann, who is the conductor of this piece, a great star, by the way, great conductor, does not echo. He's talking about the Rausch. You can feel the enthusiasm, but more than enthusiasm, it is something that must go on, even if it hits a wall or goes to a ravine, it must go on. So when he was talking about how to perform this piece, he said, well, sometimes I really have to pull myself back, not only because otherwise you cannot hear the other climaxes anymore. A climax can only be a climax if there's some rest, some quiet piece before that. But also because he said, "Well, I get completely mad." So that's why I said, "Well, it's a very German opera."
Well, it's perfect that you say that, because Wagner himself called this a drama. He didn't refer to it as anything else but a drama.
Definitely.
It's interesting what you say about rules and constraint, because of course the entire love story is based upon really constraint, because they're constrained by the potion that they take in the beginning.
Yeah,
that's right, love potion. It's quite an odd love story, actually, when you think.
Yes, it's a very strange story, actually.
because it's not actual free will. Which is sort of the odd relationship with Schopenhauer.
Well, yeah, they realize that the potion is what's causing the love, but they still go through with the love.
They don't have a choice. They have
no choice, with the emotions have actually taken control of them at that point.
And that's typically Schopenhauer, indeed. Yes. Shall we talk a little bit about Schopenhauer, maybe?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because the interesting thing is, people always talk a lot about Nietzsche, but they do tend to forget that Nietzsche is always in dialogue with Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer is the big father figure, you might say, of Nietzsche, next to Wagner, by the way, Wagner also. But Schopenhauer is, I try to be very short. His main proposition is there are two sides of reality. Like Kant, there's the empirical thing. We can know the things outside through our senses. But there's also the Ding an sich, the thing in itself, and we cannot know what it is. No, that's definitely
no.
Kant.
You're getting confused with Dasein.
Oh, right.
Ding an sich. And Kant thought it was like this, that we, for example, if you have, he compared it to a sphere, a ball. You can know the outside of the ball, but you cannot know the inside. And the inside is the Ding an sich. Now, Schopenhauer said it cannot be, this Ding an sich cannot be an object, because objects are things that we know empirically. But, he says, there's at least one thing in this world where we have knowledge in two ways. That's our own body. You know, you have knowledge of your own body through your senses. You can see what your hand is doing. But you also have the inside, the interiority. Those are two aspects of the world. And he says, so the Ding an sich is your interiority. And the things outside, he proposes, also have this kind of interiority. An animal, but even in a mathematics.
This is all simply the Cartesian question of the relation between mind and matter. And
No. Yeah.
That's what Schopenhauer tries to answer.
It's not at all, because matter can be known in two ways. It's not. That's different. And the essence of this interiority is the will to live. In other words, desire.
Leben.
Yes. And this is so. These are the two aspects that Schopenhauer investigates, and he also says, well, this Wille is something that will never end. You will never be happy. All happiness is just a short relief from desiring, and then you lack something else. So Schopenhauer says you must destroy the will to live. That's his
yes, and that's exactly what you're talking about, the Wille zum Leben that he was speaking about. He was also very respectful of love, like one is respectful of a nuclear bomb. It's something that gets in the way of more important things in life. This love,
especially because love and sexual love is the will to live in its essence, you might say, the most extreme version of it. But the interesting thing is, Wagner, he read this and he liked it very much. He was a great admirer of Schopenhauer. But maybe Wagner does not follow through the idea that you have to destroy the will to live. Maybe he enjoys the tragedy of life. And in that respect, he resembles Nietzsche. Because Nietzsche agreed with Schopenhauer. He said, yes, there's eternal desire, and happiness is only quite short, but you have to do it anyway. You have to enjoy the tragedy.
The thing with Nietzsche is that his thing was always also about being able to forget. He thought humans remembered too much and categorized too much. They should be more like the animal in the field who was able to live in the moment. And I guess this is kind of a German thing, because Schopenhauer talks about this, Heidegger talks about this, Nietzsche talks about this idea of experiencing the genuine.
Yes, well, please.
The other thing that I think you can look at with Tristan and Isolde from a Schopenhauerian perspective is the difference between a universal the will of the universe and the will of the individual, because the potion, if you like, takes precedence over the individual will, and this is the idea of the universal rather than the individual. I personally disagree with Schopenhauer on the idea of a universal will, because I think that there are competing wills, but that is the difference between a Christian and a pagan perspective.
Well, Schopenhauer was interested in.
Here we go. Here we go.
Actually,
don't mention the C word, please.
Actually, for the Christians and the pagans here, it might be interesting to know that Schopenhauer was actually interested in Buddhism. It was his
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, this is something I wanted to bring up also about the Paris period. Is that in Paris, Wagner met Arthur de
Not just
Gobineau.
Buddhism.
Yeah, no,
Not
but
just Buddhism.
in this period, interest in Orientalism was growing, and you see this, for example, de Gobineau, who took a lot of the Vedas and contextualized them into a racial theory of Europeanness. And he's also the person who introduced the term Aryan from Persia and northern India to the European vocabulary. And he was a great influencer of Wagner. And what you see is that a lot of the people around Wagner are concerned with these topics of Orientalism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and so on.
Yes, but the thing is that Schopenhauer first developed his own philosophical system, and later on only discovered Buddhism. And then he said, well, it seems that other people agree with me. So it's really that Schopenhauer was quite original in his thinking. He was
because Buddhism is quite pessimistic as well.
Yes.
Schopenhauer was too.
Yes, but I think the thing with Buddhism is that it's a very individualistic and egocentric religion, and I don't like it much at all.
Well, that doesn't matter if you don't like it.
Yes, it does.
There are people who say that Jesus, Jesus as a philosopher here, actually came across Buddhist ideas, which I think is very possible and very but is interesting in its negativity and its pessimism and its.
Well, speaking of pessimism, Schopenhauer was so pessimistic, even sex was a little abhorrent to him, because one of the quotes that I always remember is that something like directly after copulation, Satan is laughing or something like that.
Oh, you do have that. Yeah, Le Petit Mort.
Yes, but Wagner was quite different. He liked sex a lot.
Yes, and Schopenhauer actually died, or he lived alone with a white poodle, and the neighbor children used to call the poodle Mrs. Schopenhauer. So he was.
Maybe we should listen to a little piece of longing in the music.
I'm just thinking of a terrible old joke where Schopenhauer is brought before the judge for bestiality, and the judge says to him, "How low can you get?" And he says, "A poodle, Your Honor."
Poodle, his white poodle, yes.
Anyway, horrible.
Right. So you want to talk about Liebestod? You gave us two versions. Would you like to explain?
Yes. Well, the first one is the Germanic one, you might say. It's also done by Germanics. So it's Hans Knappersbusch and Birgit Nilsson. Yeah. And it's maybe interesting to see the difference in interpretation. You might say Maria Callas she brings the Italian view on life to Wagner. It has more emotion in it, but it's still somehow a little bit modest at the human level. So the Italian opera is really about human tragedy, but it's not completely universal and well, it is universal, but it's not cosmic, you might say. So it's interesting to compare those two. The other one, Birgit Nilsson, it's wonderful to see how she's singing. She's standing next to the conductor, and she's simply a singing pillar, you might say. She doesn't move much, but she creates an immense sound, you might say. But the thing is, she is more. It's even more beautiful than Callas. Less emotion, but it has this cosmic quality, you might say. And maybe we should just listen a little bit to it. We can talk a little bit about the content of what she's singing later on, maybe.
Yeah, I think as well afterwards we can talk about the difference between the mythic and the cosmic against the personal.
Okay.
Jung, then we can bring in Jung and all those other lovely people. So shall we?
Not to first Birgit Nilsson, please.
Yes. All right. So Birgit Nilsson and Hans Tapsbuch's version of Liebestod. All right, that was the Birgit Nilsson version.
And with the beautiful resolution of the Tristan part, of course.
Yes.
Which is completely at the end when she is dying.
I have to say that the Tristan and Isolde dynamic reminds me a bit of the dynamic in Siegfried, where he, of course, rescues Brynhilda from the fire and then marries her, and then he forgets who he is and he's forced to marry this other woman, and there's this whole line of you cannot go against destiny and so on in it. And,
yes. Although I must say, this idea of the potion is not the best dramatic ingredient in that opera, but Wagner had to explain it somehow. But it's for the character development not such a good instrument, I would say. But anyway. By the way, maybe some anecdotes about Birgit Nilsson. She said she was asked, "What is the secret to singing Isolde?" This opera of 4 hours, and then she said, "The secret to singing Isolde is comfortable shoes." Because you have to stand on stage all the time, right? It's really. And she was also a rather boisterous woman, you might say, who had a lot of rows, even. For example, with Joan Sutherland. And then Nilsson was said if she thought that Sutherland's famous bouffant hairdo was real. I mean, it was very big. Huh? And Nilsson answered, "Well, I don't know. I haven't pulled it yet."
Okay.
All right. So she was quite a formidable lady, you might say. I don't know. Is it formidable or formidable? Formidable. Okay. Anyway, so that was about the Birgit Nilsson. And what she's singing is, I've sent you the text, haven't I?
You have?
So,
do you want me to read it, or?
No, well, not all of it. I would say that's a little bit too much.
Okay, so the song is Deutschland, Deutschland.
Yes, that's some other song, I think, but
That's
also
actually,
with a lot of longing, I'm sure.
Yes, that's Deutschland.
Hang on a minute. The horse vessel lead doesn't go like that.
That's correct.
Yes, that is also true.
Right, so what she sings, I guess shall I read the first paragraph or so?
Well, maybe the last part, because that's where you see it's about the Tristan, who has been killed, but she sees him in a kind of vision, and the others don't see it, but she sees it. And then maybe it's nice to hear a little bit of the last part.
So can you read it so you know where to start?
Okay. Shall I do it in German or in English?
Do it in German. The English can go. I mean.
Okay. Okay. Heller schallend, mich umwallend, sind es Wellen sanfter Lüfte, the wave. Sind es Wolken wonniger Düfte? So is it clouds of sweet scent? Wie sie schwellen, mich umrauschen. There we have the Rausch. The Rausch. Soll ich atmen, soll ich lauschen? Soll ich schlürfen, untertauchen, süß in Düften mich verhauchen? In dem wogenden Schwall, in dem tönenden Schall, in des Weltadems wehenden All, in the universe, ertrinken, drown, versinken, sink down, unbewusst, höchster Lust. So it's really, it's almost orgasm, you might say. You have this rather fuck senseless, maybe.
Yeah. Sorry, can you do that again in falsetto?
Ertrinken!
You can just listen to the original afterward, okay?
Yes, that would be better, I'm sure.
So we now have the version by Maria Callas. Do you want to play that now?
Yes, that would be nice. That would be nice.
So this is Maria Callas. not sure why, but this particular version reminds me of movies like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and Dr. Dolittle.
Dr. Doom.
Well, but you do have a point in this sense that Wagner's music is rather like film music, you might say. You have these wonderful pieces of music which are really climactic, but there's a lot of also atmosphere. It's an atmosphere. So you have to wait for the very condensed, beautiful pieces of music for quite a long time, but then your reward is wonderful, of course. But a lot of the music by Wagner is kind of more creating the atmosphere, like film music. Actually.
That is very interesting what you're saying about film music, because I think that film music is very much based on Wagner in that you have to add tension or add emotion to a scene. And this is actually one of Nietzsche's critiques of Wagner in Nietzsche contra Wagner. But I don't see that as detracting, to be quite honest, because the idea of Gesamtkunstwerk is that the whole thing functions together anyway, almost like a film. You know, the whole opera is, if you like, is like a modern day film in that it tells a story. Yeah, it is Gesamtkunstwerk in that you have music, you have acting, you have stagecraft, great scenery. And a great script, if you like, in the form of poetry.
Well, unfortunately, most Americans were exposed to Wagner's work in cartoons. So,
really,
growing up as a child, you heard Wagner most likely when you were a child through Bugs Bunny being flattened by something, or.
But Disney made some wonderful music with movies, you might say, with classical music, didn't he? Like The Sorcerer's Apprentice and things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which is based on Goethe's poem, of course.
Yes. We always return to the Germans, don't we?
We do indeed, yes. And German idealism.
But who can complete this system? I don't know this system of German idealism. We thought it was Trump, but now we don't think so anymore, I guess.
I have to say that I really agree with Heidegger that we fucked up somewhere along the way and we completely missed the point of philosophy. And I think this is exemplified best in Wittgenstein, when he tries to define philosophy through a hard system of language. Of course, he comes back on that later, but it's entirely the wrong precepts of what philosophy should be. It shouldn't be analyzing what life is, but sort of trying to make meaning in life.
Well, that's perfectly what Hegel said, because Hegel believed that every era had a sort of repository of certain wisdom, and that you could learn from every era, so that, for instance, we could learn something from medieval period, and that the progress was sort of a messy process, and that we overcompensated for previous mistakes of previous eras, and that we have to take the best knowledge of each era and expound upon it until eventually we reach some higher purpose, a higher knowledge from all the mistakes of the previous generations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting, going back to German idealism, is that I'm currently translating a work by the German film director Hans-Jürgen Süberberg.
Oh, really?
Yes, which is about the fortunes and misfortunes of art in Germany after the Second World War. And he said, and this is quite, I agree absolutely with him, and I never thought about that before. Basically, Hitler killed German idealism.
Yes, he became too associated with him. He killed a lot of good things.
Because for Hitler, the folk, the people, was the artwork, and basically he was impressing German idealistic philosophy upon his artwork, and so therefore the people and German idealism were intrinsically bound together, and therefore could be deconstructed with impunity after the Second World War. I thought that was an amazing idea, and I agree absolutely with it.
I would like to read that article.
It's a book actually that I'm
Really?
translating.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm translating
The
for
loss of the Second World War completely destroyed the German spirit, and I mean the Germans are not the same anymore. I guess the Austrians are more German these days than the Germans are. Us Dutch are more German in some ways.
You know what? When you say that, I think about little enclaves. Like if something were to happen to Great Britain or to Germany, there are still enclaves of these, albeit some are quite small, like the Falkland Islands are quite English in their character, and in the German culture would survive in southern Brazil, believe it or not, because there's quite a lot of Germanic people living there that have kept the customs and traditions, although I do believe they have completely stopped speaking German and speak Portuguese. But as you know, in southern Brazil, there's quite a large German population.
Yes.
That's true, and in Argentina and Chile as well.
Southern Brazil basically pays for the rest of the country. It's the same story everywhere.
It's the same story everywhere. Yes. What shall we do now?
Well, you had the.
Well, I think it would be interesting, as we've seen the version from Kalle and everything, to look at the difference between how the Italians look at opera and how the German, well, at least how Wagner looks at opera.
Yes.
Because Wagner is interested not so much in the personal, and I think that this comes across. This comes very much across in Tristan and Isolde, and develops beyond that when we get to this version of the Nibelungenlied and Volsungesaga, Der Ring des Nibelungen. But here very much he's more interested in forces, in will, in the divine, rather than personal love stories, and I think that comes across with this idea of the love potion in Tristan and Isolde, and this is very different from a very human and personal idea of opera that the Italians have.
Yes, definitely.
And I'm not saying that one is better than the other here, actually, because there are strengths and weaknesses with both.
Well, funny that we talk about the Italians. I mean, the Italians, of course, kept more of their national spirit, but I'm not seeing much of a cultural revival in Italy either. They seem to just be going full on the globalism, individualism thing.
But do you think it's more stagnant than the actual self-destruction that's happening in the Germanic and Anglo-Saxon world?
Well, the Mediterraneans are always a bit slower with everything, aren't they? So it'll take a longer time, but I think it's going there, and there's no...
So you think it's just lethargic self-destruction and not actually, as the Germans are lusting for it?
No, it's being imported. It's being imported into Italy and the southern European countries. I remember from my time in Portugal that every development from the America and the rest of the West took like 5 years to arrive. Everything from fashion to music to everything. So the extreme leftism probably hasn't arrived there yet, but well, it will.
Hopefully,
well, it has arrived in Italy already, I'm afraid. If you look at the newspapers, what they write about those wonderful so-called immigrants coming from over the sea, it's really horrible.
And Italy has one of the worst. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Italy has the worst birth rates in.
No, that's Germany.
Europe. Is it Germany?
It's Germany, but Italy probably isn't great. I mean, I think the ones who are the healthiest are obviously the Eastern European countries, Poland, Hungary.
Oh yeah. 400,000 births, and I believe this first part of 2016 or 2017, I believe, there was an article written about the Polish birth rate was rising dramatically.
Well, that's good to hear. Very good to hear. Yes.
I think that, you know, we can't really. I don't like this idea of, you know, saying, oh, this country's worse than our country and stuff like that. I think that, frankly, we've got to start looking at things in terms of we are nationalists, and, you know, and our enemies are our own people who aren't.
Yeah, I'm definitely a European nationalist. Canada, Australia, the entire European countries. I don't differentiate because we all sit in the same problem. Actually, we're in this same lifeboat together.
You're
and
an American. Of course, quickly. You don't see the differences.
there are differences, but as far as the political danger that we have is
there are absolutely differences, but, and here's the point: we are living in a time of great change, and the point is, what kind of change is acceptable and what kind of change is not. And for me, the kind of change that is not acceptable is genetic degeneration, if you like. And I don't think that it would make that much difference if, you know, if kind of Belgians mixed with Italians, or and so on. You have to kind of be a bit more pragmatic, if you like.
I think the best comparison was made to what happened when the bombs were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. The cities were rebuilt, but the genetics basically remained the same. They were Japanese. Now, if you look what happened in Detroit, Michigan, for instance, a city that was called the Paris of the Midwest at one time, was demographically destroyed. And the maps of Detroit, Michigan, if you look at it, it looked like a nuclear bomb was set off. Yeah. If you compare the maps of what Detroit looked like in the 30s to now, there are entire parts of the city that have become uninhabitable because of crime and urban decay, and then houses were in disrepair. It does look like a nuclear explosion, but because the demographics changed, and in Japan, they were able to rebuild and retain their Japanese character.
Yeah.
Well,
you see,
I don't know about that.
When I go to Budapest, I see Budapest as being more my city than London.
Well, if I have to go to our capital in Amsterdam, I'd only like to go there with a damn flamethrower and a combat squad. But it's really bad. I mean, you go to a cafe, they all speak English. They're all exchange students. There's of course the red light district, the constant smell of weed. If you walk through Amsterdam, you will at some point have a wave of weed flying in your face. It's awful. It's really awful. And then I live in Rotterdam, which is a 52% non-white city. So the only times I really feel at home in the Netherlands is when I have to go somewhere like the south or the east in the countryside, which is still completely white.
Overijssel,
for example.
For the 2 out of 3 students in Amsterdam are not of Dutch origin. Huh? 2 out of 3 of the high school population.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what you mean. Not the exchange.
No. If you look at the high school population, 66% is not of Dutch origin.
Yep.
Do we also mean not of European origin?
Mostly, yes. In allochtoon in the Netherlands is generally the same as non-white, pretty much. They've also already tried to make that word, of course, racist and ban it. But, well, I don't see the point because we just have to invent a new term.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's cognitive linguistics. It's a battle.
Yeah. At any rate, you also sent me the full Walküre by Telemann. Did you want to play a piece of that?
Well, it was the piece we played at the beginning, you know.
Yeah, but
So-
sure, yeah, okay.
We can still play a piece of it, but maybe something else.
Yes, you wanted to also play the Meistersinger von Nürnberg.
Yes, because that's very uplifting, grand music, and maybe we can, we can give a little bit of hope and to our listeners that way.
Maybe. So, which part would you like to play from? Because it's 4.5 hours long. From where?
No. I mean just the beginning of the overture. So I'll send you a link.
I can find it.
Well, but I want to hear it from Telemann
Okay.
because I really like his interpretation. Let me see. Here it is. And it's played by the Vienna Philharmonic, I believe. So that's really good, good orchestra.
Okay. So just play this entire.
Yeah, well,
10 minutes.
just
so,
a bit, just
Alright.
a bit of it.
so we'll play about 2 to 3 minutes of this.
Yeah, a few minutes. That would be nice.
All right. Here we are. Okay, so that was about 2.5 minutes of the Meistersinger von Nürnberg. Na, ich glaube, dass wir zum Ende erreichen dieser Show.
Echt?
Yeah.
Schon!
Schon, yeah.
Sehr gut. Yeah, so Wagner was, of course, one of the most anticipated to our listeners. I think we should talk a little bit as a conclusion about one of his patrons, Ludwig II of Bavaria, Bayern. He was a very eccentric person. He was very interested in fairy tales, art, culture. He built Neuschwanstein Castle, which is actually in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, now that I think about it, and it's used in several other Disney films. It was also the inspiration for the design of the Disney castle, and he sponsored Wagner for most of the later part of his career, and he also helped set up the Wagner Festival, which is still going to this day after a short break around the First and Second World Wars. He was deposed as King of Bavaria because he spent the entire state budget on art projects, on new
many
theaters, castles, new theater halls, and so on. And he died under quite mysterious circumstances. He was probably shot while trying to escape after he was being held, as he was declared insane and held, deposed, and then he was his body was found on the lake of the castle where he was being held, and it's suspected that he was killed while trying to escape. It would be a very good story in and of itself. It's quite appropriate for Wagner.
The story of Ludwig is very interesting.
Yes.
Would make a good opera, definitely.
I know already of a ballet that has been made of it.
Okay.
Actually, yes, but you see in Ludwig actually the degeneracy of the aristocracy, I would say. It's also the genetics. They all married their cousins, and we know what comes of that. So
most of European royalty by the First World War had the same blood disease because they had all married relatives of Queen Victoria.
Exactly.
Yes, hemophilia. That's
hemophilia. Yeah, there was the Romanovs had that as well, I believe. The Russian royal family.
They were the worst case, actually, which is what led to their downfall in a way, because Rasputin, of course, claimed to have cured the hemophilia of one of the sons.
I believe.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I'm not really sure about how much influence Rasputin had on the whole Russian Revolution thing. I think there were too many other factors for him to get too much. Well,
it destroyed the confidence in the monarchy.
Maybe. But by 1905, there were already bread riots.
Yeah, but the idea was pushed that he was basically running them as puppets.
Yes, but that's happened in the past with monarchies now, hasn't it? I mean,
it has, but when you've got quite powerful groups who are against the monarchy and wanting to take their place, especially those who are not Russian and have a large foothold in the media and stuff like that. We know who we're talking about here.
Something Wagner was really fond of writing about as well.
Yes, indeed. Although he's nowhere near as bad as people claim he is, and it's very reasoned, the case that he puts forward. Let's not forget that he was a very intelligent man, and not some kind of crazy imbecile that he's portrayed of being in this in this kind of way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to the monarchy, it's very true that insanity also ran rife in the aristocracy, in the higher aristocracy, I should say, throughout Europe. You had George III famously going insane, and Ludwig II's younger brother Otto was absolutely insane, which probably gave them an excuse to declare Ludwig himself as insane.
Well, wasn't there a member of the British royal family at one time that I remember reading about some of the birth defects, and I don't remember if it was in Britain or somewhere else, where the birth defect, someone's lower jaw was so prominent that he couldn't close his mouth properly.
That was probably Spain.
Philip, right?
Yes.
He had a jaw that was so pronounced that he couldn't close his mouth properly. It was.
Oh my god!
That's a result of inbreeding, all right. That was.
We do understand genetics, don't we?
Yes.
We're so aware of genetics. We see it every day.
Well, this is the irony of the left, that they will actually point to stuff like that, but when it suits their cause, when it suits their cause, and yet they deny it, in the same breath. This is the typical double think of the left.
So, is there anything else we'd like to add about Wagner? I'd recommend everybody to read about Wagner. He's a very interesting figure, and we didn't even cover half of his life.
No,
I
There's
think-
something interesting that
extremely
Hegel wrote about Wagner, and I think it's very significant because Hegel said, I've been reading too much Dutch lately.
Hagelslag.
Hagelslag. Hegel said that music came to an end with Beethoven, and it is believed that stimulated Wagner to surpass the old and try to produce something new and something so above Beethoven that it was seen as somewhat of a challenge to Wagner because he was so inspired by Hegel.
Interesting. Now, there was an anecdote.
Also probably inspired by hailstones too.
Well, I have to say,
The
two
Germans will
philosophers-
get that one.
Yes. Hagel, yeah.
Hagel.
German's Dutch. But I have to say that of the philosophers I really hate, Hegel, Rousseau, and Marx top the list because Hegel is at fault for the whole progressive idea, you know? The idea that you can progress through history and that there's a final stage of history which will be ultimate human happiness, knowledge, and so on. And I think that the left has taken far too much inspiration from that sort of thinking.
Well, I think the best philosopher for people on the go and people that want little tidbits of wisdom is has anyone ever heard of La Rochefoucauld? The Maxims of La Rochefoucauld?
Yeah, La Rochefoucauld, yes.
Now I'm
Oh,
reading
yeah,
this
yeah.
book, and it is the Maxims of La Rochefoucauld is so wonderful because it's just little tiny bits of wisdom that it's almost as if he were writing for someone in the 21st century that needed sound bites and little bits of information, and he thought that philosophy was too complex that it was defeating its own purpose with 3,000 pages of thinking of the intimate details of everything. So in the Maxims of him, he just writes interesting little bits. Like he said, I believe, there are many people that would never fall in love if they didn't know there was such a thing in the world.
Yeah.
Just little bits of information. If people are interested, I think they should just pick up a book, The Maxims of La Rochefoucauld, and just check out some good philosophy on the go.
Okay. Right.
I'd recommend. I mean, I've mentioned this before, but I'd recommend Thomas Carlyle. Actually, I don't agree with everything that Carlyle says, but he's an excellent beginning, if you like, especially as he's a progressivist in terms of science and technology and stuff like that, but from an extreme right-wing position, and from a very traditionalist position.
Nice.
And also he was mentored by Goethe and brought German idealism to a British audience.
I'd recommend Jordan B. Peterson. He's very interesting and he's a very easy to listen to, easy to understand gateway into philosophy. And you can put him on as a podcast while working. Anyhow,
should we actually, because we haven't even or barely mentioned the ring cycle. Should we do a podcast just on the ring?
We could, but well, after all, this we should address this. This will be the last podcast in this series, as we have pretty much just finalized all our choices and given an introduction to classical music. We will be doing more of these sorts of podcasts, possibly with the same team, possibly not. We have to see. On the table are poetry, music. Sorry, not music. Yes, music as well. I mean, in the sense of not classical music, but.
This is your
architecture.
bloody industrial, isn't it?
As well, yes. We're not going to be discussing the damn 80s prog rock. I mean, no.
The 70s prog rock.
Even worse.
Martial Industrial.
What are you talking about? The 70s prog rock is the successor to classical music.
It's damn awful. I prefer metal to that. But anyway, this is the last podcast in this series. We'll be making some other high culture oriented podcasts, poetry and architecture for sure. I'll also try and pull in some people to talk about specific genres of classical music. I have probably someone to talk about Hungarian classical music, and we will see how exactly we'll do that, because then we'd have 7 people on the panel, and that's a bit much. But yeah, we'll be doing this more in the future, and I hope we can expect David Yorkshire back for more of these.
I'd be delighted, if there's anything that I have knowledge upon, then I'm available. Hungarian classical music is probably not one of them, though.
No, I understand. I'd pull in some Hungarians to do that one. So, but yeah, I hope the listeners enjoyed this series. And
before we go, Yorkshire and I had a little funny story about
that
happened. Would you like to tell the audience about our little discovery outside of the Vienna Opera House?
Yes, well, there was a poster up for Parsifal, funnily enough, by Wagner that night. And we were wondering if we had time or not to go and see it. Unfortunately, I had to leave that day. But this guy, seeing that we were looking at this poster, came up to us, and approached us, talking in German. So, so I answered him. And it just so happened that he and his wife had 2 tickets for Parsifal that night, but he couldn't, but for some reason that he made up on the spot, couldn't make it, and could sell us these tickets at a knockdown price. Of course, he was a ticket out, and and I sort of said, "Yeah, okay, we'll think about it."
Very dubious character.
Sent him on his way, but he was a very smartly dressed man, and obviously took us for 2 tourists and everything. But I recognized that his accent was an East European accent straight away, and it was not a native Austrian. So,
but Austria, Vienna is such a classy place that the scalpers, instead of trying to sell you Lady Gaga tickets, are trying to give you Richard Wagner opera tickets.
Well, this is
in a smart suit.
I've experienced this sort of thing as well in London. Whenever I go to see theater, I go to London, because it's not a very far trip at all. And you can't get decent theater in the Netherlands. It's always very modernized or reinterpreted. So you have to go to London. And then they do indeed. You get these scalpers selling you tickets to all sorts of theater plays and so on. But the interesting thing I found last time I was in London, which was probably 2013 or so, that I was in the West End and near the Chinatown area, and also where all the theaters are. And there were all these beggars just lying next to these really fancy theaters. And I don't know. It seemed really characteristic of our modern times.
Yeah, it's a sickness where we have our old dying society and the remnants of it being upheld by a few people that are willing to spend money on the tickets, and then the scavengers trying to sell the tickets. It's depressing, actually.
Yeah, well, I guess Spengler was right, but he was a damn pessimist, he was.
Yes, too much of one, absolutely.
Anyway, I guess we'll...
But there's the thing about Spengler is, and I shall leave us on a note of optimism,
he died.
Is that he saw... yes.
He died.
He saw life as seasonal. And that we were in the autumn then, and so we are in the winter now. But isn't it just spring now? Aren't we just celebrating the birth of spring?
Oh yeah, Vivaldi spring.
Yes, and I think that the time has come for our Renaissance, that we should be entering the spring again.
Yeah,
and, what a lovely thought. Yeah,
it's amazing. Yeah. It's Easter, and you haven't bitched about... Well, you bitched about Christianity once, but on the whole, we kind of avoided the topic this time.
Yes,
well,
we did.
He's a Catholic now. After his first full mass, he was in Vienna, he was completely mesmerized. So,
I don't know about mesmerized. I was kind of glaze-eyed, really. But yeah, we haven't even got on to Nietzsche's critique of Wagner about him adopting Christianity.
Well, Nietzsche, you can pull Nietzsche into a lot of subjects. He's a very interesting philosopher, but you know.
Yeah, but he has a very specific relationship to Wagner. Perhaps, almost as the errant son.
Perhaps we shall have to carry this on in another episode. But for now, we'll have to call it a night, and maybe we'll do a follow-up indeed about the ring cycle and about Nietzsche and Wagner and other things. I'd like to explore the ideas of Chamberlain, the Gobineau, and Wagner as a sort of continuation. But well,
yeah, that would be great. I'll tell you what, people. Write in on the comment section if you want to see that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and if you want us to explore the modern classical era, we have not done that yet. And there are composers in the modern era that are quite good, and we can explore that if there is interest. I know this team wouldn't mind getting back together.
No, sure not. Anyway, I am thank to our listeners, and like we just said. We are always open to suggestions and input, anything, and also let us know if you want to see a follow-up on Wagner. And I guess we'll close off this series then with a hearty goodbye.